Hi, I'm Wade from Thoroughbred Diesel. This is Montana Cherry from SunCoast Converters, and today we're going to be talking to you about 68 RFE failures. All right, so Montana is up today in Kentucky, and he is spreading the goodness that is SunCoast transmissions. And so we've got a couple of things that we'd asked him to talk about on camera for us today. And my wish list was doing some 47, 48 failure stuff and some diagnostic hard gauge stuff that he's going to walk us through. And then I told him that I wanted to give him a platform to speak to you all about 68 failures, the phone calls they field, what they have guys look for. So we'll be doing a little bit of work inside this video. Most of this is going to be letting Montana talk about what he's seeing, helping you guys prevent failures, what to look for to find a failure, as well as we're going to be doing some ride along with some scanner work. We're going to be looking at it on some EZ Lynk data, some stuff that you guys have got. You all are able to see these PIDs on and figure out what's going on in your transmission or kind of get a diagnosis of it. But probably going to be quite a bit inside of this video. So more than anything, I just really want to let Montana talk through 68 RFE. Montana Cherry is the technical advisor at SunCoast Converters, as well as a member of their R&D team. So he sees this. He's in the trenches every day. So this is your time to shine, dog.
My time to shine. All right. I'm going to shoot off the hip and let's just talk about, what I see. Not so much how to prevent it, because there's really no good way to prevent failures in a 68 other than don't drive it, right? But anyways,
which is comforting.
Yeah,
by the way.
But stock form, everybody calls in like, I'm not sure if I need a trans. So let's just talk about common issues that I hear and what the results are. First one is, of course, hey, I was towing my truck, check engine light came on, it went into limp mode. Typically at that point in time, you're going to scan it. You'll see that you have, gear ratio error in 5th gear, gear ratio error in 6th gear. If there's no other accompanying codes, one thing we can do, and I'll probably refer to this a couple times in this video, but one thing we can do right there, okay, let's go to our CVIs. Let's see what our CVIs look like.
Tell us what CVI stands for.
Clutch volume index.
Okay. All right.
What that means, the computer is smart enough to know how much fluid it takes in order for a certain clutch pack to apply. So when this guy is new, you'll probably see on the overdrive side in one of our transmissions specifically, your CVIs may vary based on the builder and their tolerances set up, but you'll see somewhere between 40 and 50 on a CVI number on a fresh SunCoast for overdrive. If we have an issue where that CVI is going up and we're in the 60, 70 range, it's burn up, flat out. Within that, I will say this, there's an outlier on CVIs. The low reverse drum itself, its normal CVI is anywhere from, I believe, 85 all the way up to 110. So that one takes a lot more fluid to apply. That number is always going to be high. That's okay. But if you have a gear ratio code, check your CVIs. If you don't want to pull the pan, another great way to just get a feel for what actually happened, drop the pan. You'll probably see some clutch material accompanying a gear ratio code, and that means for sure it's burn up. Now, moving on to valve body. On the forums, you guys will probably see some good info, and with the good, there's always some bad info that come out of it, okay? Valve body, especially on some higher mileage trucks, that can be the do or die for the transmission as well. Inside of this valve body, there is one particular switch valve that I'm going to talk about, and that is your SSV bore, okay? Your SSV is a solenoid switch valve. Shoot, I should have looked up codes before we started this because I don't have them memorized.
Well, you didn't give them, that's okay.
I didn't,
the
yeah,
incorrect ratio code, that's the king.
Right, but you will also get a pressure switch code. So you'll have an underdrive pressure switch code, and what that's going to be is your switch valve itself. Your switch valve is worn, the bore is probably worn, the valves are hard anodized, so typically the bore takes the brunt of all the wear, and what that allows is it allows fluid to bypass and essentially be where it shouldn't be at that point in time.
The switch valve in the
switch valve is in the valve body itself,
and it's one of the main.
It is
one of the main
yes.
bores. Okay.
Yep. So if you have a failure on that point, you'll definitely have some pressure switch codes. Definitely recommend, if it just pops up, stop if you can. If you can fix the valve body, chances are, when you're dropping the pan to change the valve body, if there's no material, you've caught it in time, you're able to put a new valve body in, you're able to keep rolling.
A question that I get a lot
Yes.
before we get too far away from the incorrect ratio code. That's the call we get at Thoroughbred all the time. Is it toast? Is the transmission toast then? And I know that's probably, there's more to it than just being able to say yes or no to it, but can you go back to that just a little bit and kind of talk through what you suggest?
Yeah, if you're getting just a gear ratio code, there's nothing else accompanying, CVIs would be the first place I would start. Let's check CVIs. Let's see if they're within the factory spec range. If they are, okay, that's a good sign. That doesn't mean it's not a clutch issue. You can still glaze clutches over, and when they glaze over, they lose their ability to hold. They basically turn into glass, they turn slick, and they don't hold power anymore. So you'll get guys, sometimes they say, hey, look, I can drive my truck low throttle, but anytime that I go above 30% or anytime I go above 50% throttle, it slips, it throws a gear ratio code. In that situation, it's probably glazed over.
Yeah. So to come back now to back where we're at with the valve body, talking about deflection and misapplies, from the valve body, could that have just been in the valve body? Could the incorrect ratio become?
It definitely could be. Another thing that you'll see on valve bodies, I'm glad that we circled back to it. I'll raise this up just for visual, but right here, these are all your accumulators in the 68 valve body. If you guys spend any amount of time on the forum, I'm sure you'll see a picture of one of these accumulator plates blown off. When the accumulator plate blows off, essentially that's going to dump your fluid. You're not going to have any applied going to that clutch. So once again, if you do get a code, a gear ratio code, any code, stop driving the truck as quickly as possible. It could be something as simple as that accumulator blowing out. Could be as simple as, I've even seen this on factory valve bodies over time. The screws that actually hold the solenoid pack onto the valve body itself, they'll come loose, they'll fall out. Now you have the potential to have a cross leak in the valve body because that solenoid pack is no longer being held in place properly. So there could be a lot of small, fairly noticeable issues that would prevent the transmission from burning up if we can catch it in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will say this, running the tech line at SunCoast, more often than not, if they call in, they say, hey, look, I've got a gear ratio code. They've had it for a while at that point by the time they're calling me. They've scanned it for codes. They have them written down. They've tried all the small little things that I just talked about because they read on the forum. But, once again, if they could have caught it in time, it may have saved the entire transmission itself.
Yeah.
Another thing that I get, people will get low line pressure codes. P0868 is your low line pressure codes. That's pretty well self-explanatory. It says, hey, look, I know for whatever reason I want to see 150 PSI, but I'm only able to make 80 PSI. There's a lot of things that could cause that, down to a faulty sensor. But more often than not, they've got some clutch wear, they've got some contamination of the fluid. And a lot of cores that I get, the pressure regulator valve in the pump itself will be stuck in bypass because there's so much contamination. It hasn't destroyed the pump itself, but it's basically locked the valve to where it can't regulate anymore, and now it's just bleeding pressure off. So if you're getting a low line pressure code, once again, don't drive it. Let's hope it's just a sensor, hope it's something small, but if not, that's pretty much the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, with the 68. If these things run low line pressure, they're not going to hold up.
Yeah. Yeah. Overheats too.
Overheats, running low line pressure also, the pump is trying to make as much line pressure as it can, but if that valve's stuck, it's bypassing, it's going to create heat. That's the easy way to go and kill a 68 is heat, of course.
People are going to ask Montana, I know you can't really, I know that this is kind of a loaded question because we are operating in the performance modification where we're raising line pressure, we're creating a little bit of heat in here, but what in a stock transmission with nothing done to it, what do these guys need to look for? What is too hot?
Too hot would be anything sustained, 230, 235 plus sustained. These things do typically run, normal operating range when it's up to 10 is about 185. That's what most people see. Some of you guys call in and say, man, my truck runs 160. That's great. No rhyme or reason to that, but most of the time, my personal truck even, I see 180 to 185, even in the dead of summer, even towing, that's where it likes to be at.
Yeah.
But yeah, anytime that we're sustaining above that 230 mark, it's really putting a toll. We're breaking down the fluid. it's really putting a toll on everything. And it's really hard once you heat it up that hot for it to cool back off also.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked in some other circles about tuning, and I know that that's not your all's department, but some tuning out there is not healthy, especially when it's coupled with any of the mechanical changes that you guys have got. So to talk diagnosis on something, so let's say a guy hasn't adjusted his tuning, or he hasn't had a conversation with his tuner about the valve body modifications he's done or whatnot. Talk to us about that, what that can cause, and then what you all have also done to keep that from wiping out a transmission in your components.
So like Wade was saying there, let's say that you guys do have, one of our pumps and valve bodies set up, or one of our full transmissions that you got from Thoroughbred. The truck has been previously tuned. You don't know anything about it. You install the transmission, and out of the box, we have a line pressure code. Pretty alarming, right? Well, with that being said, without knowing what tune's in there, let's just say that your tune was trying to command 200 or 225 PSI line pressure. Everything that we're doing to our valve body, it doesn't require any additional tuning to get that pressure. So if you're trying to command pressure, it's like stacking chips back in the old day. Yeah. We're making modifications, the tune's trying to make modifications, and now we're commanding way more line pressure than it's ever physically capable of doing. Obviously, if our valve body is set up to run 170 PSI, it's going to show 170 PSI at the line pressure port. If you're commanding 225, that delta right there, the difference that we have, is going to trigger that low line pressure code. So even though the transmission is functioning properly, with that tune being incorrect for it, it will trigger that low line pressure code. That's probably the most common thing that I get. They call in and say, hey, I've got your transmission in here. It's throwing a low line pressure code. And come to find out, they are commanding too much line pressure for it. And it's never going to show that 200 PSI at the line pressure port.
When are we seeing input shaft failures on these transmissions?
Input shafts, I'm glad you brought that up. As time goes on, they become less predictable. With that being said, I've seen bone stock trucks. Somebody has a core that had a stock converter and a stock transmission, and his input shaft let go. And he swears up and down it's a stock truck, there's no tuning on it. Now I've got guys that make 520 horsepower on a stock input shaft and don't kill it. I haven't really found a rhyme or reason to it. Our cutoff, if you go above a category 2 transmission with us, it automatically gets a billet input shaft on the 68. I try people who are on the fence, they're kind of in between a category 2 and a category 3. I always try to push to upgrade the billet input shaft more often than not. It never hurts. At that point in time when we're building it, you guys aren't paying any additional labor. All you're paying for is that one part to be added to it. It really is luck of the draw. I hate saying it. Just before I came up here on this trip, I was getting ready to leave the shop, and somebody was bringing their core back to us, and he said, man, I'm having some weird issues. I got a no lockup situation, and he had just installed it. Pulled the truck on the rack, pulled the transmission out because we went through the diagnostic process. I couldn't find anything. He just has a no converter lockup situation. Come to find out, the input shaft had splintered all the way down, and the truck was about a 450, maybe a 500 horse truck on a good day. Had a really hot tune in it, but that was it. So we, in that case, did repair it for him. Typically, any transmission builder out there doesn't fix an input shaft situation, but man, we really try to stand behind our product. Yeah. And if we say, it's going to be good for 550, we try to stand behind that. In that case, he wasn't abusing the truck. He was just bringing his core back. So sum it up, it really is luck of the draw. There's no hard line. Like 47, 48s, we can pretty much all agree around about a horsepower level where those input shafts like to go. 68s, tuning plays such a big key. Some of these guys run tuning that commands second gear lockup. Obviously, that's going to put a lot more strain on the input shaft. Hitting it, in second gear and leaving it locked throughout the shifting. There's too many, variables with the 68 to put a clear-cut number on it. But basically, if you're going to be doing anything more than just towing with this transmission or putting a fairly mild tune on it, I really recommend doing a billet input shaft on it.
Yeah. Converter failures. Do you get calls on stock converter failures? What happens there?
I do. Most common complaint with a factory converter, guys that tow, trucks that have decent miles on them, they'll come up to a red light randomly and they say, hey, the truck was pushing me through the red light. the torque converter wouldn't release. It was locked up. It was, stuck in lockup. Converter had failed. Another way that you get a converter failure is the opposite. Guys that are putting power down, they're, beating these trucks pretty good. They will completely strip the lining off the torque converter. The lining will obviously, end up in the pan in the form of burnt clutches. And they have a no lockup situation there because there's no clutch left to lock up.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, the factory converter, it does leave a lot to be desired on stall speed. That's a completely different talk there. But as far as the lockup goes, I've seen converters come in where the whole entire front of these guys, they're blue. They have just overheated the crap out of them. And we can probably go and say that, okay, well, it's been slipping for some time to cause that much heat. Once the clutches glaze over, we talked about some clutch glazing with the 68. The converter's no different. Once those clutches do get hot, they'll glaze over, and they're just going to slip their butt off until they can't do anything anymore and shed all the material.
Yeah. And honestly, I think as far as in stock form, this has to be the worst shifting transmission in stock schedule. And just to talk this, because I know that people are going to ask this, it has to be the worst shifting transmission that was ever put out by any OE in any platform.
I think I can agree with that.
What was the deal there? And a lot of people talk through fail safes on that. That was, the CVIs and the shifting strategies, but it's just bad.
It is bad.
Talk to us about that.
What makes it bad, it's not so much the transmission shifting, but what we run into on the 68, it's fairly unique to the diesel scene. 68 uses a partial unlock on shifts. So you have a really nice transmission that shifts 1, 2, 3 pretty good. Fourth gear is where everything starts to kind of run over the top of each other. Fourth gear is our first gear where the overdrive clutches are on. Okay, typically in factory form, trucks, if you're not in tow haul, if you're just in normal drive mode, these trucks will lock the torque converter up in fourth gear. Well, now you feel a fourth gear shift. Okay, now we feel lockup. Now we're 1-to-1 as far as the converter goes. We're direct. We're 1-to-1 gear ratio. Okay, now I can, I'm merging on the interstate. Truck's picking up speed really good. I'm in the throttle 60, 70%, feeling good. Commands the fifth gear shift. Well, now that converter partially unlocks. We make the fifth gear shift, and now that converter locks back up. Now all this happens, like that. So there's a lot going on. Everything's, we're tripping over ourselves to try to make the next step, to try to make the next stair. And that's what happens on the 68. And that is solely the way that they're designed to operate. Back to what you're talking about, this transmission is fairly, underrated, I'll say, for the Cummins engine. It's not enough. You look at this compared to an Allison or any of the Ford transmissions, this guy's a baby. So Dodge knew that. That's why they're unlocking the converter on a shift. Not only that, but if we have a fully locked shift, it's going to be pretty harsh, pretty violent. Yeah. But that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Even in aftermarket transmissions, this partial unlock, it's designed to be like that. I get guys that call in a lot after they've installed a transmission. They say, hey, I'm getting something that almost feels like a shift flare. And that's exactly what it is. Yeah. The converter is coming unlocked. They're seeing about 100, 150 RPMs of fluctuation on the dash, and then it falls back, and they don't know what it is. Yeah. The factory converter, it's so soft and mushy when it comes back into lockup. It's hard to tell when it's in lockup, when it's not, versus an aftermarket converter. It's going to be a lot more firm. It's definitely more noticeable when it's in lockup.
Yeah. And it never fails. You're always loaded. Like the first thing that Adam and I noticed with this truck, with our 25-foot trailers, which is nothing, probably 12,000 pounds, Adam. This 6th gear lock, like you're going up a 2% grade. You need to be in 5th here. I'm making RPMs. I'm keeping EGTs on control, and the damn thing will just put 6 for absolutely no reason. Yep. There's been no change in terrain. There's been no change in speed. There's been no change in my foot position, and it just, I'm going for 6 right now. Why? Just
fuel economy.
That's exactly right.
Fuel economy.
This is great. Thank you.
No. The worst thing to come for the 68 was the 342 gear set and the 13 up 2500s. Yeah. They're great for, people brag about mileage. Oh, I get great mileage. Well, what's the cost of that? That's the cost of that.
Yeah. $10,000 transmission.
$10,000 trans is the cost of that, 22, 23 mile per gallon fuel range.
Yeah.
But that flat out, that's the reason why. You go back, like my personal truck that I drive at SunCoast, it's a 2012, fairly decent amount of little add-ons there, and that's the truck that I absolutely beat the crap out of to go and develop new products for you guys. But that truck with 373s and 35s, it is a dream to drive. It's great. I love it. You get in one of the 13 up with 342s, and like you said, you're in sixth gear, converter locks up at 40 mile an hour, and you're sitting there at idle. You're like, what is going on?
I'm trying to
with
figure out how
this?
to get it in manual shift, get back down to get back control of it. Yeah, it's awful. All right, well, I guess we've kind of nerded out enough on this. So, you know, we're going to do this however you want to do it. This is a healthy truck, but I think in this
We'll see if we can fix that here in a second.
That's exactly right. So I guess what you're going to show us is what we're looking at to see if the transmission is healthy. So hopefully this saves somebody. If you go out and you're looking for a truck, you've got ability to take a scan or an EZ Lynk with you. We're going to show you what to look for. We're going to simulate, I don't know that we can simulate a failure, but we're going to simulate a failure of some sort, and Montana's going to show us kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, we'll recap CVIs, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about on this partial unlock. We can see it via the scan tool, and we should see it on the dash of the truck as well. When it goes to partial unlock, RPMs will jump up a little bit, just to make you guys familiar with the way the transmission works.
Yeah. So we'll get this truck off the rack. We'll get it strapped on the dyno. We'll simulate a road condition. We'll get a scanner out. We'll show you what we're talking about.
Welcome back to Diesel University. We have Switchblade Wade in the driver's seat now, key on, our scan tool hooked up. The theory behind this is, let's say you just bought a truck, or maybe you have a truck and you just want to get a general feel for how the transmission health is. This truck in particular is a 2018 with 172,000 miles, pretty common.
17,220, but nobody's counting.
I can't see, it's only 17,000 miles. So actually low miles on this truck, but it's been driven by a 16-year-old for quite a while now, so let's see what the transmission health is looking like. Starting off, you know, I think it's really worth checking and seeing if you have any sort of pending codes. Now, a pending code is not going to trigger a check engine light, but that means, hey, the ECM or TCM thinks they may have seen something. It's going to go and put it as pending. If it has another condition, it'll go ahead and set the light. But we've got the codes read out here. So far, nothing comes up under transmission. We have reductant level 2 low and engine coolant low. Those are pretty common on the Cummins trucks. A lot of times that coolant sensor in the tank goes bad. But what we're going to roll into now, we're going to go through and check out these CVIs. Now, a CVI is a clutch volume index, and what that means, the computer knows how much fluid it requires to engage an oncoming clutch, and it will spit out a calculation of that measurement and give you a rough overall guess of how that particular clutch is wearing. If it is a good tight clutch pad, your CVI number will be lower. If that clutch is degraded and we have more tolerance, the CVI value will be higher. So Adam's going to go ahead and bring the camera in here, and we'll look at those CVI numbers up close. All right, in our scan tool, we're going to find all of our CVI values under the data selection on here. This particular one is a Snap-on Solus, pretty advanced scan tool. You guys at home that are doing this, I will go over how to check these with EZ Lynk. It's pretty simple, but we'll go and do the harder one first. Go into our data section here, and we're going to be scrolling quite a bit on this scan tool itself. Now, before you go and check CVIs, I really recommend you go out, drive the truck normal, don't beat on it, drive it normal, get it up to operating temp. That way we have accurate CVI numbers to start off with. And on my phone here, I have a very easy to find. Adam, I'll see if I can have him maybe attach this with a link to the video, but these are the acceptable CVI ranges that I have on my phone here, straight from ATSG. So let's roll through here. We're going to roll down. These first ones, we're going to ignore those. What we're looking for is our normal CVI values, and you'll see that. So if we go and look at right here, our 4C clutch fill volume index, we see it's at a 37. If we look on our chart here, fourth clutch, 4C is fourth clutch on here. Scroll over, acceptable range is 30 to 85. We're at 37. That clutch pack is on the tighter end. That's perfect, that's great. Right where we want to leave it. Now we get to scroll for quite a while. Adam will speed this up in the video, I'm sure. Right, so what we have in front of us here is our LR clutch fill volume index, okay? This one's at 89. I get a lot of calls and people question this because this is a standout compared to all the other CVIs. All of our other CVIs will be between, 30 and 55 typically. This 89 value seems like it's going to be a lot looser than all the other clutches, right? Well, if we look on our CVI chart here, our LR clutch CVI acceptable range is anywhere between 45 and 134. Now, typically, these values, I've never seen them lower than about a 70. Most of the time they hover between 90 and 110. That's completely acceptable with that. Overall, so far, this transmission is looking pretty good. So if we look here, this is what I was talking about. We want to look for our normal fill volume right there. Normal, neutral to drive, underdrive, clutch fill volume index. That is a 62. For reference, your underdrive clutch is used for first gear, second gear, third gear, and fourth gear. So this one definitely gets abused. 62 is the value that we're getting. If we look on our chart here, underdrive, anything from 30 to 100 is normal. I will say, from a SunCoast transmission, if you guys install one, you'll probably see these CVIs for underdrive and overdrive both. They like to hover around 50. That seems to be, whenever we go and set these clutches up, that's where we end up with the CVIs 50. So this one's a little bit looser, not anything to be concerned about. Once we get up into that 80 range, then we know we've got some problems going on there. 80 to 100, that thing's pretty well smoked. We're going to continue scrolling down. What we really want to look for is this overdrive CVI number, okay? And we're right in line with our underdrive. The overdrive clutch fill volume, we're at a 63 per our chart here. Actually, it doesn't list over. Oh, it does. I missed it. Overdrive is also 30 to 100. Same rule applies. The tighter we are, the better off the clutch pad typically is within that operating range. 63, nothing to be concerned about. Fairly normal. I will say once again, on a new SunCoast unit, this typically hovers in the 50 range. Once we get up into that 80 range, I would be concerned.
Is this the parameter that we're dealing with here in Montana that will be attached to the 6-gear incorrect ratio?
Yeah, overdrive will definitely, if you guys are getting gear ratio codes, we need to look and see, what clutch is associated with that particular gear. In this case, 6-gear, if you have a 6-gear ratio code, our overdrive clutch fill volume is definitely going to be probably the hot ticket that would cause that, and that's what you want to go and target. Same thing with 5th gear. If you're getting something crazy like a 1st-gear ratio code or a 2nd-gear ratio code, a 1st-gear ratio code, we want to look at that low reverse CVI number there. That was the one previously in the video. It showed 89, if I recall correctly. If that thing gets out of the operating range, I think operating top was 143. If we're anywhere near that or past that, we can probably say, okay, there's something wrong with that low reverse clutch, or possibly a sprag issue as well. If you guys at home like to do burnouts and boosted launches, the sprag is definitely a weak link in the 68 that'll also cause 1st-gear ratio codes. Let's see what else we can pull up on here before we fire this truck up and get it up to speed.
So you guys that are out there doing burnouts, the data's going to tell on you.
It will, yeah. If the guys are out there, purely abusing the truck, the computer will go and tattle.
So, special shout out to the 16-year-old that owns this truck.
Honestly, for him being 16 and the way that you've described the life that this truck has had, these CVI values, everything appears to be flawless.
Good job, buddy.
I'm just scrolling through here to see if there's anything that may spark interest in my mind that I want to relay to you guys there at home. I think that's going to wrap up our CVI on here. We have another UD fill. So the difference, if you guys recall, the previous UD fill that we looked at was a neutral to drive UD fill. So what that means is the first apply of that underdrive clutch, which typically does take a little bit more CVI a little bit more fluid volume to go and fill it. This is an operating CVI. The differences within that, like I said, your initial apply is going to use more fluid versus an operating CVI number. This CVI number is at 47, very, very well within spec. Actually, it's a little bit lower than our initial apply, which made sense. 47 is well within spec. 30 to 100 was the underdrive fill spec on that. Now, like I said, this snap-on is a little bit more advanced than what you're going to see. I think now's a really good time. Let's go and roll over into EZ Lynk and let me show you guys how to check the CVIs with EZ Lynk. It's a little bit more simplified. There's not going to be as many readouts for your CVI. It'll be a lot less confusing for you guys at home. All right, back at Diesel University here. We have removed the snap-on and we've gone to what most of you guys will have at home, and that's going to be an EZ Lynk setup. We're going to throw up a screen recording here and go back into how to check CVIs with EZ Lynk. A lot easier for you guys at home. It's really, honestly, it's easier to go and check everything on EZ Lynk anyways, check for codes. You can do the quick learn off of EZ Lynk. It's a great product. I like it.
Yes.
So we are screen record. What we're going to be doing is setting up under our dashboard. We're going to go in here and change over our tiles to go and show us what the CVIs are on here. And I hate to say it, but you'll probably end up losing your configuration that you have on here. Take a picture of it, remember what your tiles were before we go and change them all over. Let's go in here, we'll change injection pressure. We're going to scroll over here, and the first one that we see is a 68 RFE 2C CVI. We'll go ahead and make that live. I'm going to leave transmission pressure up. We're going to come back into that here in a second. Vehicle speed, we're not using that right now. Scroll all the way back over, and our second CVI that we have is 4C. Set that up. Engine RPM, not using that. After our 4C, we have our low reverse CVI. Following low reverse should be underdrive. Nope, it's overdrive. Make that live. And boost, I'm not worried about boost right now. And there's underdrive. Okay, with all of our CVIs loaded onto the screen here, once again, let's go ahead and pull back up that ATSG chart and let's reference what we have here. So first one is our 2C. Our reference for 2C is going to be anywhere from 25 to 85. On here, we're spitting out a 39. That's a pretty healthy 2C. If you guys recall, 2C is used in second gear and sixth gear on this transmission. It is a planetary holding clutch, so it's not your typical overdrive clutch as most builders and most forms are going to have it listed as. Okay, following that, going over to 4C, we have a 37 spit out for our CVI. 4C, anywhere between 30 and 85 on this one is acceptable. 37 being on the lower end of the spectrum, that's a healthy 4C clutch. 4C is used for third and fifth gear in this transmission as a planetary holding clutch. Okay, underdrive. Underdrive spit out is 47. Underdrive acceptable range or normal range is between 30 and 100. Once again, the lower that number is within reason, the better off you're going to be. With us sitting at a 47, that's very, very common. Like I said, our new SunCoast transmissions, we go and handle anywhere, hover around the 50 CVI mark, so 47 is well within that spec, right on target where it should be for a transmission that has not been burn up. And then moving on to overdrive CVI. Overdrive CVI, acceptable range is also 30 to 100. We are sitting at a 63. Once again, 50 is where we end up at, typically on a fresh build. 60 is not anything to be concerned about. Once again, we get up into the 80s, and that's where I would start being worried. I would start definitely planning on a rebuild, getting a new unit, whatever the case may be on that. And last but not least is our low reverse CVI. It's sitting at 89. We talked about that. It has a wide range. Let me pull that up for reference. I know the top side is 143. Sorry, excuse me, 134. 45 to 134 is your low reverse acceptable range. We're at 89. This one always hovers higher. It's going to typically be, in the 90 to the 110 range, completely acceptable. It is a larger piston. It does require a lot of fluid to apply that. All right, Wade, we're going to go ahead and fire the truck up. And what I want to show you guys is, you buy these trucks used, you may not know if there's any transmission tuning in it. I'll show you an easy way to look for any sort of transmission tune that may come with this in the form of line pressure. So in factory form, the 68 RFE makes 160 PSI of line pressure. Typically when these trucks are tuned, the tuners out there will go and add line pressure. Most of them run between 170 to 175 PSI on a stock unit. If they have a file that's for a built transmission, they normally range from 200 to 225 of commanded line pressure. So let's see, this truck, to my knowledge, has not been tuned, but let's go ahead and fire it up and we'll go and confirm those numbers with the viewers here, okay?
No tune, but modified valve body.
It does have a modified valve body.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
I got to find the brake.
Screen recording is still going on. I am going to be monitoring our transmission line pressure actual and our transmission line pressure desired. Desired is what the TCM is commanding for line pressure. Your actual transmission pressure is what is being read at the line pressure port via the line pressure sensor. All right, so foot on the brake. We are 125 desired, and we're making between 120, 130 on the actual side. It's normal to see it bounce up and down. Your solenoid pack is always regulating that pressure, trying to meet that desired pressure. Foot on the brake. Take your foot off the brake. So if you guys notice on the screen recording, when he took his foot off the brake, the commanded went down from 125 down to 60 PSI. Foot back on the brake, and it should pop right back up to 125 just like that. So go ahead and put her in gear.
Foot on the brake.
Foot off brake, and let's start rolling some. All right, we're back down to 60 PSI. This may not work. We have to go and take a brief hiatus and get the truck restrapped. It looks like it moved a little bit. We're gonna need to bring this up to road speed, so we'll be right back. All right, so what we have now on the right-hand side of the screen, I've got our transmission actual pressure, I've got our target gear, I've got our desired line pressure, and I've also got torque converter slip on here. What we're gonna do is run it up to about 40 miles per hour. That should get us into fourth gear, and that should also lock the torque converter. We'll be able to see that on our EZ Lynk via torque converter slip. It should be in the 0 range, plus or minus 10 RPM. So go ahead and bring it back up 40 mile an hour. Now what we want to pay attention to on here is our line pressure itself. So we're back into fifth gear, converter is locked in. Now I'm going to have Wade roll into it, and what we should see is transmission pressure should increase to about 160 PSI. Wade, go ahead and roll into it pretty heavy one time. So if you guys look at this, all right, now that I can hear myself talk, if we go back and look whenever he got on the throttle, you'll see line pressure desired shot up to 160. Our line pressure actual overshot that a little bit, which isn't it's not a bad thing. Having healthy line pressure is key to make these 68s work. But like I was saying about the transmission tuning, this truck does not have a tune on it. You saw the desired line pressure, the commanded line pressure went to 160 PSI, and that is signs of a stock calibration. Like I said, if you have transmission tuning, most tuners out there will change that to 170 or 175 PSI for a stock trans, 200 or 225 PSI if it's for a built transmission file. Now with that being said, I know we've beat the zero tune valve body to death in this little series that we have going on here, but I do want to take a minute and talk about the line pressure with that zero tune valve body. You guys don't want to command any more than 170 PSI with that valve body. If we're doing that, we're always trying to make 30%. We're always trying to make 30% more line pressure. So if you're commanding 200, it's trying to make 260 PSI. Physically, it's not going to. It is limited inside the pump to be able to make 210 PSI. So that's all I have as far as that zero tune valve body caveat there. If you guys have other aftermarket valve bodies, talk with the builder, see what line pressure they recommend you run with their valve body. All right, the main goal for this segment of that video, I'm trying to go and show you guys some base level diagnostic work on the 68. Obviously, you don't have to have a dyno. It was just really nice and convenient for us here, for me to be able to stand outside the truck, talk. But with EZ Lynk or even with a snap-on scanner, you're able to record all of that data. So you don't have to be watching it while you're driving down the road. Record it, go for a drive cycle. We'll get all the data that we need off of that. One thing that I did want to go back into a little bit, the line pressure, the reason that I went over that so heavy, one of the most common issues with these trucks, you'll be throwing line pressure codes, a P0868 or a P0933, P0934, P0935. Those are all transmission pressure or pressure sensor circuit related codes. And this gives you a way to go and look in there and see, okay, is my transmission pressure actually low? If I'm commanding 160 PSI, but I'm only making 110, now we need to do some further diagnostics. We need to look into, do we have a sensor problem or do we have a physical transmission problem? The 934, 935, those are pressure sensor circuit codes. That's going to be in your voltage reference system for that sensor. It could be something as dumb as the pigtail itself, having a pin push through, or on these trucks, the pressure sensor is pretty close to the exhaust. If you guys go up and have a 5-inch exhaust or something, it puts it that much closer. Everybody knows, from all the way back in the 80s, the Dodge wiring has never been anything to call home about. So just some really simple, basic things to check. 933 it's a general sensor code. Most of the time it is solved by replacing the line pressure sensor itself. I'm a big advocate of going with an OEM sensor on there. I haven't had much luck with the aftermarket sensors. The ones that you can pick up from auto parts stores, man, they don't seem to read correctly. I always recommend anything sensor-wise for these transmission speed sensors, pressure sensors, go OEM. Solenoid packs, go OEM.
Another thing that I want to talk about on base level diagnosis on these trucks is how much of a diagnostic nightmare that you can have on these trucks with bad batteries. If you've got a battery with a bad cell in it or something, so one of these trucks you go out and you pick up on the lot, if you get in it and it's got a cranking issue, it seems like it cranks slow, that's going to be a battery issue. You're not going to be able to trust your electronic diagnostics on this transmission until you get the battery taken care of. So a big thank you to Montana for coming down and doing this 68 video with us. This was kind of on our want list, and it's a big thing. It's a question that we get the most, probably transmission platform, is 68 diagnostics, and I hope that this is going to be helpful for you guys. I hope it's going to be able to keep you all from maybe purchasing a truck that you shouldn't purchase at X price, because you're going to have to throw Y amount of dollars into it to get it up to an operating truck. So thank you to Montana. Thank you to the guys at SunCoast for letting him come up and do this video with us. So if you guys have a question about 68 RFE transmissions, transmission diagnostics as a whole, just give us a call, and thank you for watching.